Thank you for your attendance today. My name is Brian Greenspan. On Saturday, December 16th, 2017, the day after the shocking discovery of the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman, I was retained to advise the Sherman family as to the manner in which they might contribute to the investigation of their parents' double homicide. The family had been understandably outraged by the unfounded police statement on Friday evening, which they believed from the outset had jeopardized and indeed compromised the integrity of the investigation. At the outset of my remarks today, I wish to reaffirm the pledge and commitment made by the Sherman family and maintained throughout the investigation to support the Toronto Police Service in their efforts to seek justice for their parents and to pursue those responsible for these unspeakable crimes. The sole objective of ensuring that no stone be left unturned and the private resources which the Sherman family will continue to make available is the enhancement of the police investigation of their parents' murders and the advancement of the common goal of finding and prosecuting the perpetrators. When Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered more than 10 months ago, the only hope and expectation which the family had is what every grieving family of every victim of violent crime should expect: a professional and comprehensive investigation in order to seek justice and closure. While the lifestyle or the position which a victim has held in society should never have a bearing on either the public resources or the commitment which investigators have in solving a crime, it is also understood that investigations of this nature are complex and time-consuming. The Sherman family is acutely aware of the pressures and responsibilities placed on the Toronto Police Services, particularly in 2018. This year has seen unprecedented acts of violence in our community. It is understood by the family that the Toronto Police Service Homicide Squad has been heavily taxed. My mandate at the outset included assembling a distinguished group of homicide and forensic investigators with the commitment which we first expressed to the Toronto Police Service on Monday, December 18th, 2017, 4 days after the discovery of these crimes, and which we have reiterated on numerous subsequent occasions. Never to interfere or compromise the investigation, but rather to provide support during this challenging process. We have benefited from a team of distinguished investigators. 4 of this group join me today. Let me briefly introduce them. Tom Klatt, who organized our efforts, enjoyed a celebrated career with the Toronto Police Service, which spanned over 2 decades, and during which he spent 7 years in homicide, where he was involved in more than 70 murder investigations. He also served as a key member of the Intelligence Bureau in elite units investigating organized crime and international drug distribution. Mike Davis enjoyed a legendary 32-year career with the Toronto Police Service, and during his 17 years as a detective and detective sergeant in the Homicide Squad, was involved in more than 100 murder investigations. Of significance in our efforts, he has been qualified as an expert on the standard of police investigations and police practices, both in the Superior Court of Ontario and the British Columbia Supreme Court. Ray Zarb was a member of the Toronto Police Services for 33 years, and for over 14 years also served as a detective and detective sergeant, during which he was involved in excess of 60 homicide investigations and countless suspicious deaths. He was also a key participant in the Special Projects section, where he assisted in the investigation, extradition, and conviction of homicide suspects internationally. He also initiated the formation of the Cold Case Unit. Brian Dalrymple also joins us today. During his 28 years with the Forensic Identification Services of the Ontario Provincial Police, his expertise in fingerprint and footwear identification, body examination, computer enhancement, and forensic photography were utilized in numerous homicides and major projects targeting organized crime. He was a pioneer in the use of lasers to detect fingerprints, and as a result, the OPP became the first police agency in the world to be operational with this technology. Other key consultants upon whom we have relied include Dennis Bulligan, who served with the Toronto Police Service for 35 years and as a staff sergeant in charge of specialized operations with the Forensic Identification Services and as a detective sergeant in charge of operations for the Scenes of Crime section. Alan Benton was the coordinator and an instructor in the Provincial Scenes of Crime Officer Training Program. He was previously a forensic identification instructor at the Ontario Police College and a member of the Toronto Police Service for over 30 years. Dr. David Chasen, the former Chief Pathologist of Ontario, conducted the private autopsies of Barry and Honey Sherman on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. And Dr. Peter Collins, Associate Professor of Forensic Psychiatry at the University of Toronto, has extensive law enforcement experience in violent crime analysis and has served as a consultant with respect to the crime scene. Let me be perfectly clear. We have not come today to either reveal the scope or extent of those investigatory steps in which we have been involved, nor to suggest the direction which the investigation will now take. We will make no public disclosure of information which either we have acquired or which we believe is in the hands of the Toronto Police Service. We have also always understood the need to maintain the integrity of the police investigation and the potential concerns with respect to sharing information with parallel private investigators. We will do nothing to compromise the public or private efforts to bring those responsible to justice. Nevertheless, we have also persistently urged the Toronto Police Service and their counsel to consider the wealth of academic literature which supports the value of public-private partnerships in law enforcement and the advantages of utilizing private resources to advance complex investigations. We believe that there are procedures which can be established to protect the integrity of a police investigation in achieving our common goal, finding and prosecuting the perpetrators of these unspeakable crimes. Australian scholars have identified a number of key factors critical to the success of private-public partnerships, including mutual respect, information sharing based on high levels of trust and confidentiality, and a willingness to experiment and consider all ideas. It has never been our intention to alienate the Toronto Police Service or to conduct an audit of their performance. Our intention has been to provide additional resources and enhance the investigation. It remains the belief of the Sherman family that by working together, we will increase their chance of finding justice. The Sherman family has conducted itself with dignified restraint and has only responded when public comment, ostensibly based on police sources, was unfounded, factually incorrect, and led the initial investigation to what we believe to be the wrong direction. Their experiences during the course of the investigation have led the family to reluctantly conclude that they must publicly share their concerns. In moving forward after more than 10 months of silence and frustration, the Sherman family felt it appropriate for the public to understand why they believe that it is time for a new initiative. On December 15th, 2017, as you know, Barry and Honey Sherman were discovered in the basement of their home in Toronto. Toronto police attended the scene, and before any investigative or inquiries had taken place, they came to the conclusion and announced to the public that there was no sign of forced entry and that they were not currently seeking any suspects. That misguided, indeed unfounded conclusion left the wrong impression that this was a self-inflicted crime, either a suicide or murder-suicide. That comment set the wheels in motion and conveyed a false sense of security to the public and devastation to the Sherman family. Police are required by law to maintain a certain professional standard in their approach to investigations, but in this case, at this stage of the investigation, the manner in which the Toronto Police Service conducted itself fell well below that standard of how a reasonable officer in similar circumstances should have acted. The police failed to properly examine and assess the crime scene where Barry and Honey Sherman were located in the basement by the pool. They failed to recognize the suspicious and staged manner in which their bodies were situated, sitting next to each other with ligatures pulled up around their necks and wrapped around a railing, forcing them into an upright position. Barry Sherman's legs were outstretched, with one crossed over the other in a passive manner, wearing his undisturbed eyeglasses and his jacket pulled slightly behind his back, which would have prevented use of his arms. The observations at the scene, quite apart from the fact that no inquiries had yet been made with respect to security practices at the residence, could not and should not have led to the premature and wrong-minded conclusion announced that first night. This was not the standard by which the Toronto Police Service is expected to fulfill its public responsibility. David Chasen, the retired chief forensic pathologist of Ontario, conducted the second autopsy on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. The three homicide investigators present at this press conference today attended at the autopsy and were provided access to photographs of the crime scene. At the conclusion of Dr. Chasen's postmortem examinations of Barry and Honey Sherman, it became clear that they were both murdered, and the Toronto Police Service should not have drawn any conclusion which suggested self-inflicted injuries. We offered access to those conclusions, but it was not until January 24th, 2018, that the lead investigator from the Toronto Police Service met with Dr. Chasen. It is our understanding that this discussion impacted and contributed to the belated public announcement by the Toronto Police Service on January 26th, 2018, that Barry and Honey Sherman were the victims of a targeted double homicide. It should be noted that until that meeting, the Toronto Police Service had filed a sworn affidavit to obtain warrants to search, indicating that they were investigating the murder of Honey Sherman and not Barry Sherman, falling below the standard of how we believe a reasonable officer in like circumstances should have acted. While the Toronto Police Service held on to the Sherman family home for 6 weeks, best practices were not followed. For example, it would be typical in a murder investigation of this sort to have vacuumed the immediate area where the Shermans were found. The intruders might have left behind a small sample of hair or fabric. The Toronto Police Service failed to follow best practices and did not vacuum the area. When the crime scene was turned over to the Sherman family, our investigative team vacuumed at the outset of their examination, which unfortunately was now a contaminated crime scene. Furthermore, the Toronto Police Service did not follow best practices in their failure to conduct a thorough examination of the points of entry into the home. If this best practice had been followed, they would have located a point of entry to the home, which would have seriously undermined their misleading and irresponsible conclusion that there had been no forced entry. This oversight in failing to have comprehensively examined the locks fell well below the standard of what would be expected during a homicide investigation. One of the first steps in a murder investigation is to collect all fingerprints and potential DNA from the scene, and to compare those fingerprints and bodily fluids with those from everyone known to have been present at the scene at a time proximate to the crime. This collection of prints and fluids is conducted for the simple purpose of elimination. Whose fingerprints do we recognize? Whose might have been left behind by an intruder? We know that today, more than 10 months after the murders, this preliminary and simple task has not yet been completed. Aside from failing to complete this standard protocol of fingerprint elimination, the police also missed at least 25 palm or fingerprint impressions that were discovered by our private team at the scene once the house had been turned over to us after more than 6 weeks of police presence. Needless to say, the failure to follow simple procedures regarding print elimination again fell well below best practice standards which should have been observed. For the family, the most perplexing and upsetting aspect of the investigation was the failure to recognize the obvious, that the bodies of Barry and Honey Sherman were staged post-mortem in a very deliberate manner. This entire process has caused needless additional pain and suffering to the Sherman family. As was stated earlier, the Sherman family understands the pressures and responsibilities that are placed upon the Toronto Police Service. Regrettably, it has become clear to them that despite the active pursuit of search warrants and exploring other investigative avenues, police resources have neither been properly managed nor effectively utilized. Therefore, as this new initiative, as an attempt to reignite an investigation, the Sherman family has asked me to announce the offer of a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the apprehension and prosecution of those responsible for the murders of Honey and Barry Sherman. A call center has been established to collect tips and information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It will be live monitored from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily and monitored by voice message overnight. The leads will be analyzed and vetted, and any meaningful information will be conveyed immediately to the Toronto Police Service. The toll-free number, North American reward line, is 1-833-668-0001, and the international number is 011-905-849-7373. Those lines have now been activated. In establishing both the reward process and the call center, we believe that the assessment of eligibility for reward and the contribution and value which information might be assessed should be evaluated in accordance with accepted international protocols and administered by an independent panel. We therefore also announce that the following three distinguished participants in the criminal justice system have agreed to assist us in this effort and serve as that panel. Matthew Turigian. Mr. Turigian was formerly Waterloo Region's Chief of Police, a past president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, and a member of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. He's a graduate of Wilfrid Laurier University and holds a master's degree from the University of Western Ontario. He was invested as an officer of the Order of Merit of Police Forces in 2012. From June 2014 until this past week, in October of 2018, he served as Ontario's Deputy Minister of Community Safety. His portfolio included the Ontario Provincial Police, Public Safety, including police education and training, as well as death investigations in Ontario. He is currently a distinguished fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs in Public Policy and Global Policing at the University of Toronto. Dr. Peter Collins who I mentioned previously, assisted with respect to the staged nature of the Sherman homicides, is an associate professor of forensic psychiatry at the University of Toronto. He has for almost 20 years been a key consultant in law enforcement with violent crime and behavior analysis units of major police organizations both in Canada and the United States. He has worked with and instructed numerous criminal justice agencies, not only in North America, but in Europe, South Africa, Southwest Asia, South America, and Australia. Frank Addario, a distinguished colleague of mine, recognized as one of the leading criminal defense lawyers in Canada, and in 2016 was awarded the G. Arthur Martin Criminal Justice Medal for his contributions to criminal justice. He is a past president of the Criminal Lawyers Association of Ontario, a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, and a vice president of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. In 2012, he was awarded the Diane Martin Medal for Social Justice through Law, recognizing a member of the Canadian legal community who has demonstrated a commitment to using the law as a means of achieving social justice. And finally, on behalf of the Sherman family, we would invite Chief Saunders of the Toronto Police Service to appoint a member of the force to join this panel in administering and assessing the eligibility for this reward. As I said at the outset of these remarks, the Sherman family is committed to ensuring that no stone be left unturned, and that whatever resources that may contribute are available to law enforcement in achieving our common goal.